fractions, let's first talk about a whole. So let's say that I have one entire pizza. I can't eat an entire pizza like this, so I'm going to have to divide it up into pieces. I'm going to divide it into 4 pieces. So if I have one pizza and I divided it into 4 pieces, then that's going to be equal to 1/4. These whole numbers can also be written as a fraction. Whenever a whole number does not already have a denominator, you would write the denominator as equal to 1, which basically is saying that if you have 4 things and you put them into one pile, there are 4 things in that pile. So let's discuss how you get from 1/1 divided by 4/1. Somehow this 4 ends up on the bottom. So when you're doing division of fractions, there are 3 ways that you can look at it. You know that a fraction line by itself means you divide. Beyond that, you also know that these are both going to have fractions. So we have our small fractions, the big line, separating them. So if you want to write them as one big fraction, then what you would do, the very bottom denominator gets multiplied by the top numerator, and the top denominator gets multiplied by the bottom numerator. So bottom goes to top, top goes to bottom. You could also say that you have 1/1 divided by 4/1. And if you're dividing, that means that you have to cross multiply. So the second fraction gets brought down to this denominator, the numerator part does, and the denominator of the second fraction gets multiplied by this numerator of the first fraction. So that's going to give you 1 times 1, which is 1, and 4 times 1, which is 4. You could also do it where you said 1/1 divided by 4/1. This division sign, we saw previously that it became a multiplication sign by cross multiplying. So something else you could do, if you didn't want to write the division sign there, you could make this a multiplication sign, and in that case, you have to flip the second fraction. So instead of seeing 4/1, you will see 1/4. And when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply the numerators together and you multiply the denominators together, or the tops together and the bottoms together. So then you get 1 times 1/1 times 4. So no matter which way you choose to do your simplification or your division of your fractions, you're going to end up getting the same number of 1/4. So now let's say we have that same pizza that I had divided into 4 slices. But now I want to eat one of those slices. So instead of 4 slices, there are only, so instead of the initial 4 out of the 4 slices, I ate one of those slices. So now there are 1, 2, 3 of the initial 4 slices left. We will come back to the subtraction in a second. Let us discuss how multiplication works first. So I've got 3 slices of pizza, but let's say I have 6 people who want a slice of pizza. I could do, this is going to be a Hunger Games option, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Figure it out. Or we could divide this 3/4 left of the pizza into 6 even pieces. And if I divided this 3/4 of the pizza into 6 individual pieces, how much of the pizza would each individual student be able to eat? So again, I've got this 3/4 divided by 6. So because 6 is a whole number, I would put it over 1. And again, whatever you want to do to simplify the fractions, I'm going to do cross multiplication. So I'm going to have this 1 times this 3 is 3, and that's the one that goes on the top. And then I'm going to have this 6 times this 4, that's 24, and that's going to go on the bottom. That 24, 3 over 24, both have a 3 in common. So if you cancel out the 3, then that can be simplified to 1/8. So if you're splitting this 3/4 of the pizza and you're dividing it amongst 6 people, each person would get 1/8 of the entire pizza. And let's see, if I divided each of these, so now we see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And remember, I've already eaten these ones, but there would be 7 and 8 slices of the pizza had I not eaten the first 2 already. So each person would get 1/8 of the entire pizza. So now let's say that I want to figure out how much the 1/4 of the pizza that I ate, and the 1/8 of the pizza that somebody else ate. I want to figure out how much of the entire pizza we ate together. So if I draw the pictures back, my 1/4 of the pizza is this much of the pizza. And the 1/8 that someone else ate would be 1/8 of the pizza. So if you combine that 1/4 and this 1/8, adding them together, then I'm literally just going to put the 2 chunks together. So we've got this 1/4 is still cut, and I know I added one more little wedge. And so, if we go back to the initial pizza, we know that this was 2 slices, and this is 3 slices. And it was out of a total of 8 slices. So we know that this is 3 out of 8. But how does 1/4 and 1/8 get you to 3/8? So now we have to talk about something called a common denominator. I cannot, once a slice of pizza has been cut in half, there's nothing I can do to remove that cut. The cut's already there. What I can do is add the cuts together. And so, because I cannot change how many cuts that I have made, the total is not going to change. I cannot change that this is still 1 pizza. I've still only ever cut 1 pizza. And so because there's only 1 pizza that I've ever cut, I cannot change these fractions. The fraction has to stay the fraction no matter what I do. So if we remember earlier, I had 3 over 24, and I said that that can be reduced to 1 over 8 because they both have this 3 in the top and the bottom. That can come out. Because these are the same fraction, the same thing applies for any other fraction. So if you need to change this denominator of the fraction, something has to change with the numerator too. And with fractions, You can only change the fraction by multiplication or division. You can't do a 23 plus 1 to get you to the 24. You would have to do a 12 times 2, a 6 times 4, etc., etc. So here we've got, so now going back to our initial question, we have a 4 in this denominator, and we have an 8 in this denominator. And in order to figure out what the new denominator is going to be, you're trying to look for something called the least common multiple. So when they say the words least common multiple, literally the word least, the smallest, common means the same, multiple, think about your times tables. So in this case, if we're starting with the numbers 4 and 8, the multiples of 4 would be 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, etc., etc., etc. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, 4 times 4 is 16, etc. And the ones for 8 would be 8, because 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 4 is 32, 8 times 5 is 40, etc., etc., etc. And so this is asking about the least common multiple. So I'm going to circle all of the multiples that the 4 and the 8 have in common. So there's an 8 here, there's an 8 there, there's a 16 there, there's a 16 there, there's a 24 there, there's a 24 there. I can anticipate there are probably more multiples, but I'm looking for the smallest one. So the least of these multiples is this 8. And so because the least common multiple is 8, I know the common denominator that I'm trying to find is going to be 8. So the second fraction is already with a denominator of 1 over 8. It already has a denominator of 8. This first fraction does not have a denominator of 8. It currently has a denominator of 4. And so remembering that these are multiples, I have to do something to this 4, multiplication or division, to get it to be an 8. So I know 4 times 2 is 8. So 4 times 2 is 8. So then I'm also going to have to do this 1 times 2, which is 2. So this 1/4 could be rewritten as 2 over 8. So now I have 2 over 8 plus 1 over 8. And when you add or subtract fractions, you combine the numerator, and that common denominator is the denominator. So I have 2 plus 1, which is 3 over 8. And so now we see this 3 over 8 matches the drawing that we made and what we knew was going to be the fraction.